Hello, Danielle and Jonathan with Kepperling Preservation Services for our virtual coffee break. Right now, we'll see if anybody joins us, but right now we'll talk about our preservation topic, which was, the guidelines for the Secretary of Interior. So if we live in a historic district, or you just want to make sure that you're preserving your building the way that the National Park Service recommends, you want to use the Secretary of Interior standards as your guidance. And so there's like levels of, I don't know, I guess levels of preservation. I don't know if that's the right terminology, but the first step that they recommend that you do is, identify what you have, retain as much as possible, and preserve it. So that means that like everything that is a defining historic feature, you want to keep it. So if only a small piece is broken or rotten, you don't need to rip the whole thing out. You can just replace. You want to retain as much of the historic fabric as possible. So that's the first step. The second step is protecting and maintaining. So every building goes through series of cycles of not neglect, of I can't think of what word I'm thinking of. Oh, decay. Yeah, it goes through cycles of decay from weather, the just age, the materials breaking down. So the way that you prevent that and help preserve the historic fabric so that it does not need total replacement is to make sure that you maintain them. So that's the least degree of intervention. So it's maintenance of the historic materials, rust removal, caulking, limited paint removal. So and that's like and if you develop a maintenance plan, you can make sure twice a year that those things are maintained, and then you can either plan for bigger projects, or if you don't need bigger projects, you just keep on top of an already well-preserved building, then you can preserve your budget because you don't have to spend a lot of money maintaining.
But save up for just in case.
Right. But like one maintenance issue is my nose is so itchy. The car is covered in pollen. Internal gutters. So an internal gutter is, you can't see it from the outside. It's like a trough, and it has a fancy cornice usually on the outside. It's on the upper cornice. Sometimes it's on the porch. Sometimes it's on a bay window. But you can't see it, and you don't, unless you're regularly inspecting it like once or twice a year, like in the fall and in the spring, you don't know that lining is rusting through until there's a big problem.
Or there's cracks or anything going on there. Yeah. Usually what you see at the bottom is the paint peeling away, and then usually at that point it's because the wood's rotten. So it rots inside out. But if you get up there and you look and you see that, there's cracks in the metal, but it's still in good shape, maybe it's time to, resolder it or fix the hole in it, and then recoat repaint it. Longevity then gives you, if you did all that 1 year, your odds are you're not going to need to do that for a few more years.
Right.
But you keep on top of it just in case some miracle happens that's out of your control. And the check is better.
You keep it cleaned out too. You want to make sure the water's still draining, because if water sits on the metal, it's kind of like a rubber roof. If water just sits there, it's going to leak through. So there's maintenance things that you can walk around and look at and make sure that things are in good condition, that your paint's in good shape, your windows and doors are operating the way they should. Like if you just have a maintenance plan in place, it makes planning for any repairs easier, and it also helps retain the historic fabric, which is what makes your building special. Because I was talking to somebody, and I'm like, there's a difference between like a historic building and just an old building, and I think it is the historic fabric. I mean, everybody has seen buildings where somebody has gone in and, you know,
gutted everything,
in the
took out the flooring, all
right.
the trim, the windows, and put all brand new stuff in, thinking they're doing such a swell job, and it just does not look the same.
No,
not at all. So.
And that's an old building. I mean, it's been there. At least the walls have stood there for a long time, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's historic or that it has the historic fabric still. So, and that's what makes the building special, which is why the Secretary of Interior, you know, has you know, maintain maintenance as a higher priority than you know, the more invasive intervention.
Which is a lot cheaper in the long run.
Very much cheaper, yeah. So the next step after you've kind of, you know, had a maintenance plan, or you have something that has been neglected and needs to be repaired. So usually repairs are repair a small amount as possible, such as a Dutchman. And so a Dutchman, they use the same term in masonry, but you know, you take it's a small, you know, you cut out the rotten part and put another piece of wood in, or you know,
or like in glazing, you would just like take off the loose glazing but reglaze it.
Yeah. So it's limited replacement material, usually in kind. Sometimes substitute materials are allowed, which is a whole other subject. And you know, you use if something's really deteriorated or it's missing parts, you use what is surviving as the prototype, so you're matching what was already there. But that's more in replacement than in repair. So
repair could be half of it needs repaired. Like say you're missing a few pieces, you're missing the muttons on a window. Well, you know what? Say your other windows are fine. Instead of just replacing that whole thing, you could have somebody come in, make new muttons, and patch it.
Right. So that would be repair rather than replacing the whole thing.
Yeah. So and it would still be better and cheaper. It might not be cheaper. Right. Depends on what all the wood and everything they do and how they do it. But it's also, you're not going to lose the look that you liked.
Right. Yeah. And the other thing with substitute materials, and we'll talk about substitute materials another coffee break, but substitute materials are acceptable if they, you know, are able to convey the same visual appearance as the existing, because you're not replacing all of it. Usually, like if it's at a touch point, it's more important for it to really match. But you know, there are, you know, it just depends on the choices. And we don't use a ton of epoxy, but epoxy is a substitute material that we do. Hi, Barbara.
That we use to repair things.
Yeah, that we use to repair things. Let's see. I think I need to unmute you. Which I need to, oops, maybe, oh, you're unmuted. Okay. Hello.
Hi there.
Hi.
Sorry.
Oh, no, that's fine. We were just talking about the levels of repair. So we use epoxy, which can be formed and shaped
molded,
like
cut.
wood, so that if once it's painted, you don't realize the
repair has been done. But whatever you do, do not do what every carpenter does at first. Learn from a mistake that I've made. Do not go to get any type of auto bond filler type wood, because it does not shrink. It does not expand with the wood. It'll just crack and fall out.
Yeah, so you don't want something for fiberglass. You want something for wood. And there's a lot of epoxies out there now. I mean, I'm sure everybody has their favorite because, you know, it's ones that they're used to using. We use a couple different kinds depending on what we're doing. So if we're doing,
we primarily stick to one.
Yeah, but if we're filling large voids, we do use a different kind. So and then the replacement, so that's like the most extreme of replacing an entire character defining feature with a new material, because the level of deterioration is too high. Usually that's the reason people want to replace windows. I will just caution again that usually windows do not need to be replaced. They're never at the level where they're so bad that they can't be repaired.
Actually, bringing that up, just hearing some of the commercials on the radios piss me off, because it is so full of misinformation and misguiding people that it's not even funny that they can get away with it. And it's just a joke, just because they want to be able to sit there and get into a cycle of like every 10 years, sell you more windows. And it's a joke when you don't need to.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Typically, when you replace windows, you want to replace in kind, the same rule as repair, and you want to make sure it matches what's existing. So there are times that like a column on a porch or something is so deteriorated that it needs to be replaced. But if you have other columns, you can match that column.
Like almost exactly.
Yeah. The other times that we get into replacement, which is less to do with the levels of intervention and more to do with true restoration, which is taking it back to the way that it had been, is we will sometimes build doors and windows to match what had been there, because they've already been replaced, and then the people who buy the house want to have more historic.
They want to put back the way it was. They find examples of trim in the house that we reproduce and everything else.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, but and this is an important point from the Secretary of Interior. They never recommend removal and replacement with new material of a feature that, even if it is damaged or deteriorated, could be reasonably repaired and then therefore preserved. And so that's what when I'm talking to people, and they're like, we need to replace this, we need to do this, and I'm like, no, there are ways to repair it, and there is a the historic fabric is important.
Yeah, like just about a year ago, we were contracted to do church doors, and they were pretty bad doors, but they wanted to put stained glass in them, and I thought, you know what, that kind of goes with it. It goes with the style. Okay, I'll do that.
It was stained glass that had been taken out of the church from someplace else, so they wanted to reuse it
into the doors. So I remade doors, but when I'm standing there, the guy looks at me and says, "We want the whole jam, frame, trim, everything replaced."
And put plastic in.
And put a plastic.
He didn't call it plastic, but that's what he wanted.
And I looked at him and I said, "What? Why?" And he goes, "Because of that spot right there. It was a spot of like a brick molding about this long with 6 inches. Needed to be fixed." I looked at him and said, "I will repair that. But if I have to take this whole frame out, I'm walking away. Years. I'm walking away from this job and not looking back, because no matter what I replace this with, will not be equal to what was there." And he got mad, but
he got mad and left.
But everybody else loved that I refused to do it, and I got the job. I mean, it just didn't make any sense to replace 200-year-old pine with something right out of the rainforest. It was like it lasted 200 years. You can't get that now. It just saddens me that stuff goes on.
Well, and I think that if other people, and it's not, I don't think it's bad intention, but if you don't come from a preservation mindset, your first instinct does tend to be replacement. And I will say, the evolution of I actually was talking about this at a meeting, the evolution of our kind of understanding of preservation and restoration has evolved in the past 20 years. Because my dad, when he started the business, he loved the history, but a lot of the projects he worked on was a lot of restoration work, where they were building new windows, new doors, to go in, historically looking, but to go into these historic buildings, where we then started actually restoring the old windows and the old doors rather than just building new. And so that's been an evolution too of the understanding of the historic fabric and things. So you're only as good as your last job, but there's some jobs that that we did 10 years ago that I'd probably approach a little bit differently now.
Yeah, you learn.
Yeah, you do.
You ain't learning, ain't worth doing.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. We, as I'm involved in the Preservation Commission for the City of Lewis, and we always get, everybody wants to replace the windows, and they all say it's because of cost and because of the insulation. They don't want to deal with storm windows and stuff. So how do you respond to that? and especially the cost factor?
Well, I will say that it is, there's a full range of replacement window prices. You can get the $200 vinyl windows,
which will not look anything
right.
like.
Yeah, so you get the $200 vinyl windows, or you can get, we're getting ready to install, we do install replacement windows. We're getting to install.
Very rarely.
Yeah. Yeah, we're getting ready to install replacement windows. We're actually replacing replacement windows that were probably put in the 70s during the original restoration project. So they're not really old windows.
Not the original.
And they were doing their best for what they were doing in the 70s, but the functionality, we've seen, this whole neighborhood was all done at the same time, and you can see this, the windows don't work real well. And there's not, because it was done in the 70s, there's not really a way to repair them. So we're gonna replace them. But those windows are close to, and just for the sash inserts, it's not even the install, are close to $2,000 a piece. So there's a huge range in replacement windows.
Each window?
Yeah, each window, and that doesn't include our labor, but the windows themselves are like right around, the order was right around $10,000 for 5.
So are they custom windows?
No, they're from Norwood, so they're from Canada. They have a 20-year warranty. And they're one of the at least based on what I have encountered in the world, they're one of the best replacement windows that I've seen. And so we do recommend them fairly regularly. Them and Lowen, and they're both from Canada.
But if they're replacing it,
the replacements that people want to do down here is more like a Marvin window.
Right. Now, see and there's a couple, there's a couple ways to approach that. That you can look at the engineering studies and show, that is not it's not an energy saving option. That really they're equal. A well-maintained original window versus a replacement window. The energy savings is less than $1 a year difference.
But they're insulated glass now. They're double pane.
Yeah, but that insulated glass only lasts about a year before the seal breaks.
Right, and they only warrant the seals for about a year. There's a building I actually want to go over and take a picture of. There's a building right around the corner from us that they're slowly taking out all, and it's an adaptive reuse. It's really, I like what they did with the property.
They were replacement windows less than 10 years ago.
And they're all foggy. And that means the seal's broken. So then you don't have the double insulated.
Well, I don't see that around here. I mean, I've got Anderson double pane in my condo.
I mean, when they start to get foggy, that's what's happening. So
I know. I think we all know that, but I don't see that that's a common. It's not a common occurrence in a year's time.
They only warrant it for a year. That's what I'm saying. The window companies, like if you look at their warranty, usually it's about 10 years, but they only warrant their glass seals for a year or two. So it doesn't necessarily happen. Like the windows that we were talking about around the corner from us, they're less than 10 years old, but and the seals are breaking. But the other thing, and I think it was a couple weeks ago when we were talking about wood windows, Pella is in a lawsuit right now, and I'm curious to see what happens, because and it was actually from a replacement window trade magazine that I found the article. Somebody had posted it on a preservation site, but they had they're saying because of the design of the cladding, which is wrapping the wood in metal, the number 2 pine that is second growth in metal, allows the water to get behind and then it rots. Well,
so it's a design failure.
Yeah, so they're arguing it's a design failure. I could have told you that, years ago, and I've seen those happen. I've seen specifically Pella windows on a wet side of a house. We've had to replace the sills and things, and they were only a few years old.
Yeah, they're like 3 years old and they were already going.
But the cladding is the same thing that happens when you wrap a house in aluminum or vinyl. Water gets behind and it's trapped. So it makes sense that would cause, you know, cause rotting, and you don't see it and your windows are all rotted. So there's, what were you gonna say?
I was gonna say, to argue the fact about the cost efficiencies, it might be more expensive up front, but you got to realize in that 50-year time period that they say you need to keep your replacement windows to break even,
30 to 50 years now.
You would be replacing them 3 to 5 times.
Yeah.
Versus repairing it.
Yeah, but I mean, you have an old house with the original windows. It's very expensive to get those windows rehabbed.
Right,
I mean,
it is, but it's
people don't plan to stay in these houses for
right.
50
That's
years.
the problem.
That's the problem, is right there. People don't stay in their houses for like 10 years or more.
So they're looking at immediate gratification, immediate insulation. They don't want to be in this project, you know, forever.
Right.
And they don't want to be putting, you know, that much of a percentage of money into just the windows.
And window restoration.
They don't want to do, and they don't want to do it themselves. I have friends that, you know, as young couples buying a historic house in a historic town of Old Newcastle in Delaware, you know, she was raising her young kids and stripping the windows and doing everything to repair the windows, you know. And that's what they did.
And I appreciate that side of it. I think that if you're buying an old house, you should be a steward to it, but I know everybody doesn't feel that way.
Well, that's true.
But from a cost standpoint, the restoration is typically more expensive, or about the same as like the higher end windows, but those windows have been there for 150 years, and they will, and so with proper maintenance, they're going to continue to service the house. So if you put money in now, and not all windows need the not all windows need the like complete restoration either, because what really costs a lot in the labor is like the stripping of the paint. But if the paint's in good shape and they just need to be weather stripped, and
you can do a lot of that without taking them out.
The chains, like if they're like Victorian, if they have the chains and everything, I mean, for like half a day, which is what I usually figure when we're doing a restoration like that, and then the touching up the glazing and installing new windows, you half a day, 4 hours worth of work, you can make the windows tight enough if they don't need to be completely stripped. You don't have to do the full restoration if they don't need it.
Okay.
So I mean, it's hard when you're telling other people you know, what to do, but I think
you need a certain level of craftsman too. You know,
not necessarily. No, window restoration. I mean, and I'm not. There are companies that just do window restoration.
Yeah, right.
90% of it is stripping the paint,
and it's repetitive. So if you could get somebody that is a good woodworker, they could do it. It doesn't necessarily have to. I mean, they probably have to have some preservation mindfulness, or they'll just tell them to go get vinyl windows. But they, you know, a good carpenter could do it. I was gonna say, we get our weather strip from Killian's Hardware in Germantown, right outside of Philadelphia, and they sell it. They sell like bronze weather strip, all different shapes and sizes, and they ship it. And that's what we typically use to weather strip the sash. And then they also sell the chain and the cord too. They sell like everything you would need to restore windows. On a review board, I think, I mean, I guess the municipality has to decide where their level is and what they'll agree to. Typically it's pretty, I mean, in Lancaster, I can go in, and as long as I'm replacing wood for wood, I get an approval. I can get a staff level approval.
You mean wood for wood? New wood windows for existing
wood windows for wood windows. As long as we're replacing in kind,
Yeah.
I can get a staff level approval.
Well, we've established that, well, every project's different, but for the most part, it's Marvin or Anderson, and it's but they allow it's wood interior,
Right. And
it's
clad outside.
and clad outside,
Yeah.
and it's they call it true divided light, but it's not true divided. But it's in between the two.
It's a simulated. That's what they call it, a simulated divided light.
That's what they should call it. Yeah. So and so
it's not as bad as the ones that pop off.
Right. So, so we won't let them do the pop in, pop outs.
Yeah.
But they still doing the clad, and it's inches at a time, but it's difficult.
Yeah, I think what I do, and when people come to me and want to replace their windows now, like the windows that we're getting ready to replace, that we had actually replaced their neighbors probably 5 or 6 years ago, and so they came to us and said, we have the same windows they did. Can you replace ours? And but typically, if somebody comes to me and wants to replace their windows, I explain what their options are and why it might not be the right thing to do. Now, when I'm doing we talked about that.
I was gonna say that's a good video to watch for a reason. The stack effect.
I'll put it in the
video. Watch a video and it explains it completely.
Yeah, the energy, the way the building works. But
is that a video that I can access somehow?
Yes, yeah, I'll send you the link.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll send you the link.
Because I can.
And then what was I thinking? Oh, but when I'm doing review work when I'm consulting and I'm doing easements, it's a lot easier because you have to maintain what the building looked like when the easement was put on. So then I can say, no, you cannot replace your windows because the trust has an easement on it. So it's very, I understand, like you have to kind of, educate, but also, go within the boundaries. But, there are times when I can just say, no, you're not allowed to do that. So,
yeah.
It is.
Well, and there are, because we do have guidelines and they're approved by mayor and council. And so we can say no to a lot of things. And sometimes, and on one occasion we've been taken to court, but it was the owner that just overstepped the line, and so we didn't win. But yeah, so it is. I mean, it's in how you do it too.
Right. It is. And I do give and take. Like Jonathan and I were just talking about this the other day, that I had to do a review on an easement. They were replacing the roof. They were like using good materials. They were doing everything that they wanted to, but then they wanted to put gutter guards on. Well, there's trees all over this property. I said, go ahead, put gutter guards on. You can't see it from the ground anyway. So you have to be practical.
Well, and I think what you just said is important, and it's what we try and remind ourselves is, is it visible?
Right.
And kind of weigh the pros and cons and the trades. We do a little trading.
Yeah. Well, and I think education's an important component. I mean, Jonathan was talking about, listening to it on the radio. I've been home a little bit more lately and seeing daytime TV where they, are telling you need to replace your windows. Like the preservationists don't have that marketing budget. We're not all in a conglomerate, so we can just push that message out. So it's educating one by one to be able to let people know that they're all alternatives and options, because I think some people just don't even know.
Well, that's true. It is true. And because they don't know, then they're fearful. Right. And so, all their neighbors have new Anderson windows, and and that's what they're selling, and the guy's real nice in the showroom, and
right. Well, that's why the energy auditor that I love, Tamison, she always says you have to pay for your energy audit, because if you don't, they're going to have the solution with what they're selling.
Yeah. So energy audit, tell me a little about what an energy audit is.
Typically they come in and they test all your combustible to make sure that everything's venting correctly, all your combustible appliances. And then they do blower test on your windows and doors and look, I think, at the overall house to see your, like they look at your
where you're wasting
heating and energy, or your heating and lighting bills too.
Where you could do better,
Yeah.
you know, like if you know, like insulating the ceiling and
Right.
the floor in the first floor in the basement
and
area,
they'll come up with
caulking,
recommendations,
stuff like that.
yeah.
They'll just come up with a whole list like that. Because
Mhm.
she's always said, look, let's just get to the point. Do you want new windows because you want to tell them in and clean them, or are you trying to, or what's your reasoning? Because replacing it for
energy is
not never the solution for a window.
just because of the negative plane of the wall.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's of course it is where a lot of you know, the heat is lost is through the glass.
Well,
actually
it feels cool, but that most of your heat's lost through the roof.
Really?
It's only on the walls. The walls account for like 10% of your heating and cooling loss total. And then it's like, but 80, I guess 10 at the floor.
Yeah, and if you watch the stack effect video, it'll explain that because it's sucking air in. It's like a chimney, and all the heat blows out the top.
Yeah. So if you insulate at the top and at the bottom, you do a lot better than at the walls, just because it's a negative plane. The air, the walls are pressurized, so the air doesn't flow back and forth.
Or another good example is in the winter, put on a hat. How much warmer are you?
Right, but the other thing is that you
that's true. Your heat loss for your body is your head.
The other thing that you see a big the Victorian window frames in like early 20th centuries with the chains and the pull and the weights, and they do lose air around in the pockets, but it's still minimal compared to what you lose through the ceilings. But the insulated glass, I mean, if you weather strip your windows and then have a tight fitting storm window, it's the same as having double insulated glass.
Oh yes, it is.
Yeah.
And yeah, I agree. But people like to get away from having to have storm windows and screens. They want the convenience. Yeah.
Well, I guess if you're like we don't live in just in a conditioned house, and I know that there are people who never open their windows, but I like to have the windows open. But
without all the bugs, so we like the screens.
But I know that there are people who just never do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. So what else was on your subject?
Oh, we finished it. It was just the levels of intervention on the Secretary of Interior.
I just lost you. What happened?
I don't know.
I hit something on my screen and you're gone.
I can still see you.
You can?
Yeah, I can still see you.
I can't see you.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know what you did.
I don't know what I did. I went to move the screen and
oh no.
Thing that went away. Well, it's 5. Oh wait, there you are.
Okay. Well, very good. Well, did you have any other questions or?
I don't. Not at this. Oh, you know, I did. I had a question about fences.
Sure.
And the styles, you know, in Lewis, we have some old metal fences.
Okay, like cast iron or?
I guess that's cast iron.
Or wrought iron. Yeah, it can be cast though.
It's either cast or wrought iron usually.
Yeah, but it's, you know, they're short fences and they're decorative, and you know, they're on older houses that have really haven't had a lot of makeover work. You know, they've been maintained. But some people are now put in, for the most part, people put in wooden fences when we have old wooden picket fences. There's a lot of old ones. Mm-hmm. And so some people have put new picket fences up. And then for the most part, they're wanting to put wooden fences for privacy, you know, across the back of their yard and then the side yard. And then our code is that, you know, they're allowed an 8-foot fence behind the house.
Right.
So from the street, it has,
you can't see it. Yeah.
you can, will come up alongside the house, but will not extend any closer.
Right.
And then it has to drop, I forget what the code height is, but it has to drop way down so it's not a visual obstruction.
Right.
And it's, for the most part, most people just return it to the house. So
Right.
it comes up and they put a gate on it, and, they may have double gates if they have a driveway. They just want the privacy and probably
Right.
the dog and some other stuff. But recently, there's been more requests for what I consider a contemporary metal fence, and it's just black.
Like the bars.
Yeah, just verticals and cross, maybe top and bottom.
Is it like the wire almost?
No.
No,
These are metal tubular.
Metal. Okay.
Yeah.
Think of flat bars at the
like
top
we
and
did
bottom
it.
with just round tubes that
Yeah,
go down.
like we did it.
Yeah, or the square tubes. Sometimes they're square
Yeah.
tubes. Anyway, so we turned it down for one house. I mean, it was quite a ruckus because they bought the fence before they came before.
Oh no, that's when you hold your breath during the meeting.
And so, the sales rep was there, and she was trying to, go on and on. Anyway, so it was turned down, and it was a little divided, but it was turned down. And then just recently, somebody else came along and wanted something almost the same, and so I couldn't find anything where that kind of what I would call a contemporary metal fence was.
Are you? I think that's fairly new and fairly modern. Have you? Where are they putting those? Like just in the back?
No, they wanted to do again across the back.
Okay.
And then down the sides, and then across to hit the building.
Right. So same way they're doing the privacy fences, but this would be, you're not really doing it for privacy.
No, they're doing it. Yeah, not really. Yeah. I don't know why they're doing it. So, I can't ask that question.
Right. So, why are you doing this?
I wondered if there was reference material on fences.
There's reference material on historic
fences.
Designs like that.
That would be like period. Somehow it would be a different period.
But I think this is a modern invention.
Yeah, and it usually ends up looking real cheap.
Yeah. I will do a little bit of research and see if there's anything that I can find. But my feeling is that is modern, and there's really not. My only, from a review board standpoint, my thought is that it's not something that can't be undone, but it's changing the way the streetscape works. So then you have to weigh those two.
Yeah, it really does. And there are some of the fences around Lewis. Yeah. One of them the city put in around a park, near a park, to define the park area from the adjacent house. Mm-hmm. So the homeowner who belonged to that house, they wanted to match the fence and bring it across, around the rest of their property, which we permitted them to do because we felt that the city had sort of set this, established this.
Right, yeah.
But then the next 2 times it came before us, we turned it down, and we said, in the one case, the guy had wooden fences everywhere else, and just in this small, probably 10 feet of space between his house and the other house, he wanted the metal fence, and it just didn't make any sense. And
right, yeah. And I'm thinking there is a metal fence similar to it's a little bit more artistic, I think, but similar to that in Lancaster, but it's at Ben's Park. But it's where they had done a bunch of urban development, and they tore down all the old buildings. So all the buildings are probably from the 70s. And they just did this metal fencing just kind of like as a decoration to make it a little fancier. But I'm thinking it's similar look, and I haven't seen it locally or in my travels around in a residential setting. No, I think they did. Actually, I think Angie's husband is the artist. I will see if I can find anything that about the metal fencing. I'm not sure that there would be anything, because all of my resource books would be like historic patterns and things like that. And I think this is something new. Mm-hmm.
Patterns for fences.
Well, yeah, like I even have I have crazy books, but I even have a wall book, like a stone wall book, like to show the different stone walls.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So,
do you think I could Google that kind of stuff? Like,
I think you probably could. And that one place that you could try to look, if you maybe it's not there anymore. I don't know if they. I was thinking Google Books, but I think that they took that down. But that you used to be able to search like all like the common like books that were before all the copyrights had run out. You used to be able to search them on Google's, but I don't know if they're still. I think they took that search engine down. So I'll see what I can find, and I'll send you what I can. Or
okay, or tell me where I can go to hunt it up or something like that.
I will.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
okay.
thank you
Well, very good. Well, have a good rest of your day and a good week.
Yeah.
And a good holiday. It's a holiday weekend. It doesn't feel like a holiday weekend, but it's coming up.
It doesn't. It's
are things opening up where you are for the holiday?
Very slowly, and mostly because we're a tourist town and
Right.
we're on the beach. We're at the beach, and so there's a lot of pressure. But they're still trying to, and who knows? Fortunately, the weather's going to be on the cold. It's going to be on the cold side, windy, and some rain. So I think that's a good thing, actually.
It'll keep people away.
Yeah, and they also come down here because we have got these big outlet centers.
Yeah.
And so, but they're still closed.
They're closed. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, and I knew that they were. I saw actually somebody on my Facebook had posted that they had rented a house maybe a month ago or so in Delaware, and they couldn't go to it because they were stopping everybody at the border, saying unless you agree to quarantine for the 14 days, we're not going to let you come in.
Well, you're not allowed to have short-term rentals right now, which is less than 3 months.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that takes away the week, the renting by the week.
That's right. And people are really unhappy about that too. I think there's
sure.
some people just doing it on the side because I've seen too much traffic. and a lot of out of state plates,
Oh goodness. And they're out and about. They're not quarantining.
No, I don't think so. And well, Chris, there really isn't much they can do. They can't go shopping. They can't go to the movies. They can't go to the gyms yet. And they, like I said, and they can't go out to restaurants. And
our anniversary is next week. And we
had,
at the beginning of the year, we were talking about going away for it. And I'm like, and I started thinking about it when everything started to get shut down. I started to get grumpy. I'm like, I'm not going to go sit in a hotel to get carry out when I could get carry out at home. Like, what's the point?
Well, that's true. That's true. You have to kind of pick your poisons, right?
It is. So, okay. Well, very good. I will follow up with you by the end of the week. I'll send you an email of the stuff that you asked about, and then we'll talk to you soon.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Have a good rest of your day.
Okay, you too. Bye-bye.